Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Really excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Krish on with us. Krish is a student that we've been working with for almost exactly a year now at this point. He recently finished going through the recruiting process a few weeks ago. Was able to land several offers but the one that he ultimately accepted, which is he was really happy with. And so I wanted to get him to come on here and kind of talk about his background, his recruiting journey, how he was able to get to where he is today. And hopefully, his story inspires you guys as well. And also, I'm sure he'll share a bunch of insights along the way that you can hopefully implement into your own process just to help you get a better outcome. So with that said, Krish, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. I know it's, final season and you just finished recruiting and you're trying to catch up with all your schoolwork. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. But if you don't mind, kind of introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and tell us kind of what your background is and, what it was like to recruit from, wherever it is that you're coming from.
Right. So for starters, I'm a sophomore right now at Cornell. I actually grew up in Mumbai in India, so I'm an international student. That's, the first thing that kind of throws a spanner in the works. Then obviously, so I'm a CS and econ major. Started off doing mostly CS and econ stuff in terms of research labs or whatever. Only found out about, maybe wanting to go into IB and the path from there. Probably second semester of freshman year, so my freshman spring. And believe it or not, that's relatively late to other people, not necessarily in terms of networking or prepping your technicals, but a lot of the legwork in terms of getting into the right organizations on campus and kind of getting into the right mindset is done over the first year. So there's a very few people like that who come into college knowing exactly what they want to do and how they're going to go about it. And so if you're not in that boat, it does kind of get more difficult. So, I'm kind of international. I have an accent, which, I kind of worked on, but it does create some sort of barrier. Like I don't watch football, I don't watch baseball. So it's not like so networking, obviously there's some friction there. And then combine it with the fact that I was kind of late. I was managing this whole CS and econ curriculum on top of recruitment. So there was a bunch of things there that kind of complicated the process, right? And so, which is why I kind of decided to join Wall Street Mastermind. And yeah, it's been an incredible outcome.
That's awesome, man. So you mentioned the incredible outcome. So I guess, can you share with people, because people are always curious up front, how many offers did you end up getting? And also, where did you end up ultimately accepting?
So I got two banking offers, one's from Barclays and the other was from Lazard. I ended up going with Barclays for several reasons, even though it's not the most obvious choice. A lot of it has to do with what I eventually want to do, which is not PE, and kind of the treatment that I got at the respective organizations. So it kind of just made more sense for me to go to Barclays. And other than that, my long-term goal is to do public equities. And I got an offer to join a fund on the West Coast this summer where I'm going, a month from now, which potentially could basically mean that I don't go to IB at all. So a win-win all around. But that's what kind of my process looked like.
Gotcha. That's awesome, man. So, first of all, obviously, Bulge offer, Elite Boutique offer, both are great offers, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, right? Some people prefer Elite Boutiques, some people prefer Bulge as there's different pros and cons to both, I would say. And so I think ultimately you got to choose the one that you feel the best about and where you feel more comfortable, right? And so I think you made a good choice, to be honest. And I remember us talking about your rationale for why you chose what you chose, and
Right.
I thought it was pretty well thought out. And so that's the most important thing. So huge congrats on that. It's really hard to get even one offer for a lot of people. And so to get multiple offers, I think that's quite the accomplishment, especially considering all the obstacles you have to overcome. Like you said, starting a bit later, being an international student, all those things kind of made the odds more stacked against you, so to speak, right? So you joined, I think in early May of freshman year, which is basically at the end of the semester, probably right around finals time. you had mentioned that you realized you wanted to do IB at some point during the second semester sophomore year. So sorry, freshman year. So prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, like had you already done, any prep or research or anything IB recruiting related on your own, or was joining Wall Street Mastermind kind of like the first action that you took when it comes to pursuing this goal?
Right. So I think, yeah, when it comes to recruitment specific stuff, this was pretty much the first thing I did. My research was mostly concentrated around finding the path. Like, okay, you go into IB for X amount of time to do X, Y, and Z after, because for people who didn't grow up, you're not don't necessarily have parents in high finance. That's not a connection you make. Like you do a job only for 2 years, and it's a well-known fact. Like that's surprising. But after I figured that out, I was basically like, I could go about this like, the trial and error method, or I can hop on with people who've done this for, the past several years, done it successfully, and kind of streamline my approach given the time constraint that I have. And I joined Wall Street Mastermind, and that's when I basically started, my first search fund internship, right after joining, so on and so forth. So that was really the beginning.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So I think like, your reason for wanting to join Wall Street Mastermind makes a lot of sense. I mean, because you talked about it earlier, right? Like given all the things that are stacked against you, plus the fact that, you didn't want to do this the trial and error method, and you wanted to kind of do it, basically put your best foot forward from the get-go,
Totally.
right? And I think that's smart because I think there are also people out there who saying, well, let me try this on my own first and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then maybe I'll come back and get help, right? I think sometimes in life that can work, or that approach can work, but whether that approach works or not depends on if the thing that you're attempting comes with unlimited retries, or if it's kind of like a, hey, you got one shot to get this right, and if you don't, then you're done, right? And I think banking is closer to that, the
Yep.
last, right? Which is you really have to try to get a junior summer internship, which will then convert to your full-time offer. Not that you can't get in if you don't have a junior summer internship, but it becomes much harder because most of the
For sure.
offers are given to summer interns, right? And if you don't have a summer internship and try to recruit for a full-time offer, probably fighting for like the last 10 to 20% of
Totally.
the jobs out there. And so even within the summer internship recruiting process too, there's a window, right? In terms of like typically, all the best firms recruit first, right? As you experience, like elite boutiques typically wrap up first, and bulge bracket banks as well, like recruit very early. And then like once those are done, then you're left with only middle market banks. And then those go for a while. And then once middle market banks are done, now you have to go down to like lower middle market or even regional boutiques, which actually for you as an international student wouldn't even be possible because they don't sponsor visas, right? And so the point is like if you try and fail first or go through a lot of trial and error, there is a cost associated with that because you're basically missing out on all the best opportunities. And then you're going to have to, at best, settle for inferior opportunities, or worst case scenario, you don't get anything, right?
Totally.
And so I think like it's really smart the way you thought about it, which is like for certain things in life, you don't have the luxury to, trial and error your way through it. Like you just got to figure out what is the best way to move forward and then take your best shot at it, right? Like you have one at bat and you got to crush it, basically, right?
100%.
So you mentioned you don't have parents in high finance, you have to learn this career path on your own. I think that's pretty typical. Like most students that are trying to break into banking, their parents don't know what banking is. So
Right.
what was it like having to convince your parents about kind of joining this program? Like, what was their reaction? Was that a difficult conversation, or how did that all go down?
Well, I think it wasn't very difficult because I was privileged enough where the kind of investment that we'd be making wouldn't, like, it wasn't a question of life or death. And it's not the same for everybody.
Yeah.
But beyond that, do it sometimes or very often is the question not of the money, but of kind of whether you actually need it. because to some people it sounds like, oh, this is an easy way out of it. Like, trust me, guys, I went through this. It was not easy. Like, did it make it easier? For sure, right? But it's not about making it easy. It's about making it efficient, and it's about maximizing your outcome. And that's kind of how I explained it to my parents. And I think this is, I probably sound like a broken record, but I think this is the simple math of things. Like, the ROI on the investment that you make, especially if you're going kind of the way I did, where I only put down a certain amount before and the rest of it was kind of on a pay later program, right? Like, if you get a job, then you pay. If you don't, you don't, right? And in that sense, like, the ROI is just like, it just mathematically makes sense. Like, if you're confident that you can use the program to your benefit and land a job, then there's no question, because then it's an insignificant amount when compared to not only your first year salary, like, it's probably not even half of your internship like stipend. So on that basis, like, there's just the pros really really outweigh the cons there, right? So I yeah, that's kind of how I explained it to my parents. And then you just gotta put in the effort. And usually things come gradually. Like, even before you get your final outcome for your junior summer, like, there will be things that indicate to your parents and yourself that you're like going about it the right way. So I think it's not something that you should be really worried about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think you make some really good points there, which is, yeah, like I think people get the wrong idea that that we're saying, hey, if you work with Wall Street Mastermind, then investment banking recruiting is going to be super easy. Like, it's actually not.
It's
Like,
not. It's not.
it's impossible for the investment banking recruiting process to be easy, right? And in fact, I would say this, which is, if you want to be successful in life, it's just not going to be easy. Because if becoming successful was easy, or if there was an easy way out, then everyone would be successful, right?
Right.
And so nothing good comes easy. But I think, to your point, um, it's about maximizing your chances of success, and also just like maximizing the outcome, right? Like, for the same amount of effort that you're going to be putting in, because you're going to be working your butt off regardless, making sure that you get the most out of that, right? Because how many people do you know that try to break into banking and fail, which is like the majority of the people, right?
Yep.
I would say for a lot of those people, it wasn't for a lack of trying. Well, I'll just put it that way, right? It's like, we're not gonna say, hey, every single person that didn't get into banking is because they're lazy and they didn't want it. Like, a lot of people wanted really badly and they worked their butt off and they have nothing to show for it, right? And so there's whole argument of like, oh, well, like, that's taking the easy way out or whatever. It's like, well, you don't have to go to college, right? Like,
No.
you could just be a high school graduate, and it's still possible to become really successful without going to college, but it's much harder, right? And so by paying all this money to go to college, are you taking the easy way out, or are you just like trying to maximize your chances of succeeding, right? And it's kind of the same thing, right? And so I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, no matter what you do, you still got to put in a ton of effort. Like, there's no doubt about it, right? It's like making sure to, like, I tell people this, like, it's not just about, in life, it's not just about working hard. It's like, a lot of people work hard, and there are a lot of people like if you think just working hard means that you deserve to be successful, like, there's so many hardworking people out there that don't make a lot of money, aren't like successful, right? It's about working smart too, right? Like, if you work hard, but also you're allocating your time and your effort and your resources in the right direction, then like you will get better outcomes, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is like, hey, we've done this, whatever, at this point over 1,300 times. We know, like, these are the things you need to do. This is how you do it. This is the order you do it in. And then you still have to go out and do the work. Like, we can't do the work for you,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, that's really helpful, I guess. So you join Wall Street Mastermind, you come in, around this time last year, probably like, yeah, we're a week out from like your annual anniversary, actually. But
Right.
what have you been doing then for the last year or so? Like, walk us through kind of, I guess, just your recruiting journey, and what were some of the things that you felt like really made a big difference for you in terms of like getting you the outcome that you ultimately got?
Right. So I think starting off, that's when you're really sticking to exactly what you're kind of instructed to do, which is I think the good way to go about it. So you're going through the modules, you're trying in because I started right around break. It was a good time where I was going through the modules and then putting it into practice, especially when it came to the networking stuff and so on. So I was learning how to do it, doing it. Obviously there's some learning in there. Like there's no silver bullet. It just makes sure that you're not making the easy mistakes. Like there's tough mistakes to make that anybody would make on any given day,
Mm.
but at least you're restricting yourself to those mistakes that you can learn from and not making the very basic ones and then you're wasting time kind of doing that. And just kind of as a point of information, like I got like the offer I accepted, I got it through one of the first ever email batches I sent out. That was over the summer, probably a month into when I started the course.
Mm.
Obviously, I spoke to them after and kind of maintained the relationship, but I could basically say at this point that if I'd started like even a month later and they were on break or something, I wouldn't have one of the offers that I do right now because they were kind of up there in the hierarchy. So they were able to connect me with everybody and it just worked out. So yeah, so that's when the networking kind of portion started and that I kept doing. And I was able to ask a lot of questions while I was doing it because as you go further and further in the relationship, the more nuanced it gets, right? Like the first call is pretty much standard, but it's the second, third call, it's the etiquette of maybe sending out holiday emails, so on and so forth. That really gets you the offer, and that's where you need the most help so that you're not making mistakes and at the same time kind of doing everything that you have to and should to keep that relationship a two-way street and not just a transactional kind of conversation.
Mm.
And then once you get closer to, midway through your sophomore fall, that's when you start interviewing maybe also for sophomore positions. So you kind of learn the technicals. The modules are super helpful, and I was able to find like through the channel resources that I could use. I ended up being very interested in what I was learning, so I just wanted to learn more and more. So I would just put a question on the channel like, "Hey, I want to learn more about this, this, and this. What do you recommend?" And they have all the resources that you need and you could ever need at that point. And once over winter break is when things kind of start, getting faster in terms of some accelerator programs and also actual internship recruitment. So you were really brushing your technicals up, making that final ask off your contacts, and getting ready for the months to come forward. And I remember I was like, it's through the channel that I found one of the opportunities that I applied to that ended up being a super prestigious accelerator program. That basically meant that I was getting interviews at other places before most other people just because they thought that I was, you know, other firms also wanted me. So while it might not have given me that final job at that one particular firm, it accelerated my other processes a lot. And I remember even putting a message about it on the channel too. Like, this is all like super fast. Like, I'm excited, but like, wow. And so that's how it kind of went for me. And then, yeah, even like 2 months in, I was basically done. Like, I had one like great offer, and then everything after that was more so like, if I get it, amazing. If I don't, also amazing. I'm kind of done. So that's how my time was.
Mm. Got it. Because then when you say 2 months after, you meant like 2 months after the summer 2025 recruiting cycle started, you already
Oh,
had
yeah,
yeah. And then so basically it relieved like all the pressure that you had. Because like until you get
totally.
your first offer, there's a lot of pressure because you're not sure if you're gonna get the offer and you just want to get that first one. But once you get your first offer that you're happy with, then everything else is just kind of gravy, basically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't ask you earlier this. I didn't ask you this earlier, by the way. But like, what was that feeling when you like got your first offer? Like, can you kind of describe that for people a little bit?
Right. So my first super, like that was my first in-person super day. Like they were flying me out and everything. And I live in Ithaca, obviously. So I would expect a bus, but like, it was like a flight and everything, and we'd flown in. Night before, I remember getting no sleep at all. And I was just super, like my nerves were super high. And the like the two interviews that I did have turned out to be the opposite of what I expected in terms of not being very technical at all. And with the behaviorals, obviously, you never know how it went. Like only they know how they felt about you in the
Right.
moment. And so they asked us to stay until later that night so they could call us into the office if we'd gotten the offer and then send us on a flight back. But I was like so done, so tired, and I didn't think I had a shot that I actually got myself a bus and went back home earlier. But while I was on the bus, I got the call like, "Hey, like we really, really liked you, and when you sign on the dotted line, like we're done. Welcome to Barclays." And I was overjoyed. Like I was in a state of semi-consciousness because I was so tired and like just stressed out. So, but I was like overjoyed. Call some friends. My parents are back home, so it'd be too early in the morning to do that for them. But yeah, I just remember being like, this is it. Like I'm good. Which yeah, can't be described in words, but it was such a relief.
That's awesome, man. When you did eventually talk to your parents, how do they react?
Right. So I mean, as you said, they don't know what it is, but they did see even over winter break, I was back home, so they saw how hard I was working and the long hours, and they were like, I mean, it paid off, and they were really just happy for me. And then they were glad that I got whatever outcome I wanted.
Right.
So yeah, they were just like, okay, now you don't have to work like 12 hours a day. You can chill. But that's how that was.
That's funny. That's awesome. So going back to kind of some of the things you were saying before, obviously it sounds like you learned how to network after you came in. You did that to um, quite a bit of success, I would say. Like you got a lot out of your networking efforts, right? And
Right.
then once the interview started, obviously you prepped the technicals, you prepped the behaviorals. You went to your first super day and was able to get the offer right off the bat. So that's obviously an amazing feeling. Um, I guess when you look back on all these things you learned and kind of the preparation process that you went through, I know there's like no alternate universe, and like obviously Wall Street Management was kind of like your first attempt at just prepping for recruiting in general. So it's not like you ever try to do it any other way. But as you think back on it, if you had tried to do everything on your own throughout this process, like are there certain things that you feel like would have been different, or maybe things that you would not have figured out on your own, or maybe you just couldn't have, I don't know, gotten to that level if you
Right.
didn't have the resources that you had?
Right. I think it's all about momentum. Um, because the thing with banking recruitment or anything that doesn't have a textbook in general is that because you don't know how to get started and what the path looks like, even roughly, you just don't end up starting. Or even if you do, it's kind of with that lack of confidence, like, am I doing things right? Like you're spending more time thinking about what you're doing than actually doing what you have to do.
Mhm.
And once that kind of got taken care of, once I joined the program, like I was able to, and once you pick up that momentum, like, yes, there's going to be like, there's no well-defined path. Like there's going to be ups and downs even after joining the program, but you're able to take care of them because you have that momentum coming in. And I believe that if I'd started doing it on my own, there's a strong chance that I would have started like rethinking, overthinking, whatever, right? Second guessing myself at every up or down in the process.
Mhm.
And that just like if I wasn't fortunate enough, like maybe I would have even stopped doing it at all, right? So it's always about knowing that you're going the right way so that every time there's like an up and down, like you can manage it because you know that you're still going the right way, which necessarily might not happen if you're not in the program.
That's a really good point. I mean, and it's not one that I've heard people make a lot, but the way I would visualize it is like, you're trying to go from point A to point B, and you've never been to point B before. Like you've never been there.
Right.
And so like if you're trying to get there, ideally, I mean, most people will use like Google Maps on their phone or like some
Mhm.
sort of GPS navigation system. So it tells you exactly where to turn and what is the most efficient route to get there, right?
Right.
If you don't have a GPS or you don't have a map and you've never been there, you're probably going to take a bunch of wrong turns and whatever, and can be very frustrating. And then at some point, you're just like, I don't even know if I'm going the right way. I don't know if I'm ever going to get there.
Exactly.
It just becomes a lot more likely for you to just probably throw in the towel and give up, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you
Yeah.
have the GPS, you have conviction and you have certainty that I am going the right direction. And if I just keep going, I will eventually get there, right?
Exactly.
And it's a lot easier to keep going because trust me, like investment recruiting is super hard, and the going will get tough at some point. And
100%.
most people at some point, and for you, I think you're fortunate enough where your first super day was converted into an offer.
Mhm.
I can say for a lot of people, that's not the case, right? I would say
Right.
for most
Right.
people, because we coach so many students now, you usually have to go through like at least a few rejections first, um, in terms of interviews before you actually convert into an offer. And so sometimes, like when you don't pass an interview, um, if you also don't know why it is that you didn't pass, right? Like so many times, like people like walk out of an interview like, yeah, I feel like I did well, I answered all
Mhm.
the technical questions correctly, and then when the results come back and they don't get the offer, they're confused because they're like, I don't know what I did wrong. That can be a very frustrating thing because
100%.
you don't know what you're supposed to change. And you're not going to get the feedback from your interviewers about what you could have done better because they're not incentivized to tell you why they dinged you.
Mm.
Right.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and a lot of the times you don't know. Like, I know for a lot of like the positions that I was able to get and the positions that I was not able to get, a lot of the times I'd made mistakes that would have gotten me dinged on any other day, but something just worked in my favor and it worked out. And other times, like I was perfect, but there was just other factors at play that I had no control over that led me to being rejected. Because, like, I think you've said that like time and time again before. Like, once you get to the final round, you're good. Like otherwise they wouldn't you wouldn't be at the final round. So a lot of the times it's out of your control. And when you're going through recruitment, it's super difficult to kind of put that in perspective. At least for me, it was like I remember going through like a couple of very late stage buy side projections right before banking recruitment really kicked off. And I was just like, yeah, there's obviously that loss of confidence, but also like if everything's just luck, like why am I trying at all? Like screw it all, right? But it's having that kind of, yeah, like and I've made some great like friends along with the community too. Like I know people I've texted like, yeah, well, how's it going with you? Like I just had this happen. Like is this normal? Like am I never going to get a job? So the whole community aspect really helps in those times.
yeah, for sure. That's awesome, man. Um, so one last question for you, because I know you're super busy right now, so I don't want to keep you for too long. But what's like now that you've come out the other side of this process, what what would you say is the best piece of advice that you have for people who are still recruiting now or maybe about to start recruiting? This could be something that you learned along the way. Maybe someone, you know, uh, gave you a piece of advice that really helped you, or maybe just something that you figured out on your own and it really made a big difference for you. Like, is there anything like that? Any wisdom that you want to kind of pass down to other people?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's wisdom because it's pretty obvious, but I want to reiterate, like you got to take every shot at the goal, like every shot that you get, like send out every email you can, go like attend every call you can with like, the most enthusiasm you've got, like give every shot that you have all you've got, right? Because like the goalkeeper's not under your control, especially with banking recruitment. Like it's a lot of luck there too. So you can control the probability of the ball getting into, kind of the goal. You can just control how many shots you have at doing that. So the more shots you take, the higher the likelihood at some point it goes inside the goal, right? And so, yeah, just do everything possible. Like don't think of anything as like, oh, maybe this won't work out, so why do it at all? Like you never know.
Hmm. Yeah. That's really good advice. I think it's similar to what I tell our students all the time, which is just focus on the things that are within your control, and don't
Totally.
stress about the things that are not in your control. Because I think when it gets to recruiting, or when you're going through something really hard in general, it's very easy for people to start asking a lot of questions about things that don't really matter. Right? Not that they don't matter, but they matter, but you're not going to be able to do anything to change those things. So for example, people will ask um, how many spots, does XYZ firm have for this class?
Mhm,
Or like, hey, if the economy, I just read an article that, the economy is not doing so well. So like,
mhm,
how does this affect, the likelihood of like someone getting in or getting an offer? And it's just like, yes, if the economy is doing worse, there will probably be less spots available, which means it'll be harder for you to get in. However,
mhm.
like, you have no control over how the economy performs. You also have no control over like what the headcount is for Goldman Sachs, right? What you can control is how hard you're networking, how well you do in those networking conversations, how much you put into your interview prep, how prepared you are for the opportunity if it does present itself, right? And so like, that's what you should be focused on, because those are the things that are actually going to move the needle for you, right? And even if you, and I'll go even further, like even if you prep everything to the best of your abilities and you're ready for the interview, you could walk into the interview and just have bad luck and run into an interviewer who's having a bad day because he got into an argument with his wife that morning before he came to work, and now he's taking it out on you. Like, I'm just saying, like, that could happen, right? But that's out of your control. And so there's no point worrying about stuff that you can't change, right? And so to your point, I think controlling, like taking every shot on goal, that is something in your control. Whether the ball goes in or not, that's not 100% in your control. So just control the factors that are within your control, right? So I think that's really, really great advice. With that said, guys, if you're still with us, and if you're still listening or watching this, and you find yourself in a similar situation, maybe you started a little bit later than other people at your school. You're not the type that like knew you want to do investment making right off the bat, when you first got into college, or maybe you're an international student and you know that's going to be harder for you to get sponsored, um, or you just understand that you only have realistically one shot at breaking the banking, and you don't want to do the trial and error, and you want to just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and taking your best shot the very first time, then I want to encourage you guys to reach out to our team. You can schedule a call to speak with us by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And basically, we will talk to you about your recruiting situation, what it is that you need help with, what are your goals, where are you trying to end up, and based on your situation, we'll give you some personalized advice on like what your game plan should look like, because your game plan is probably going to be different from someone else's game plan, because everybody's different, right? As a candidate, like you all go to different schools, you're in a different year, different GPA, you got different experiences on your resume. Some of you are international students, some of you are not. There's just a lot of variables that affect how you have to approach recruiting if you want to kind of optimize, the way you do things, right? And so there's no one size fits all solution, which is why we're going to have to talk to you and learn more about your situation to be able to give you a more customized game plan. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go ahead and book that call. And after you talk to us, either way, like if you want us to help you implement this game plan, we're happy to help you with it. If you, want to just take the game plan we give you and run with it on your own, you're welcome to do that as well. And so, there's no pressure either way, but at a minimum, we're just going to try our best to add as much value to you as possible, right? So with that said, hopefully you guys found this interview to be helpful. I think Chris is having some technical issues. He ran out of battery, and so he unfortunately had to drop, but we're pretty much at the end of the conversation anyway. So hopefully his story is inspiring to you. If he was able to break into banking and you follow the same steps that he followed, like I'm sure you'll be able to get a very, very good outcome as well. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. We're going to wrap it up here, and we'll be back with more of these client interviews for you guys in the near future. And thanks for tuning in. And until next time. All right.